I kind of get the sense that this album was a commercial choice, that it wasn't an album that, Ian and Martin had a burning desire to make, like, say, some of the 70s albums were, or even the 80s albums. But rather it was an example of the record label said, hey, you guys should do a Christmas album. And it was something that was put together rather quickly while Ian and Martin Barr were working on their solo projects, which I think probably had much more of their attention at the time. Hello, my name is Ian, and welcome to my YouTube channel. So first off, a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever it is that you celebrate, Happy Tullmas. We have a new Tull box set to talk about, and seasonally so, it is the JETHRO Tull Christmas album. Now, this is a 4 CD and 1 Blu-ray collection, which includes newly remixed versions of their 2003 Christmas CD. The 2003 Christmas album was a mixture of new and old pieces, with some traditional pieces that were rearranged for the occasion. I do remember fairly well when this came out. It was something that I think I probably picked up on day of release, and as such, I've listened to it quite a bit over the years. I find it to be nostalgic. It's warm, it's inviting, it's friendly, it's unchallenging, but it's Jethro Tull. And, as somebody who's not really a huge fan of the holidays in general, or really Christmas music at large, it is a nice treat to dig this out once a year. I don't know how much more you're going to want to play this, but for a holiday listen, if you are a fan of this music, you really can't go wrong. So with that in mind, I'm going to talk a little bit about the album here, as well as the extras and the new mixes. There are three new mixes included, that being a 2024 stereo remix by Bruce Soord, as well as Soord's Atmos and 5.1 mixes. Now, I've spent a little bit of time with each of these mixes, mostly the Atmos mix, because I think it sounds the best of what's on display here. And I've also had a chance to check out both of the shows, only one of which has been officially released before. So it is nice to have something new here. So first off, I'm just going to talk about the album a little bit. Preface it by saying that I'm a huge Jethro Tull fan. Obviously, I spend an awful lot of time here on YouTube talking about this great band. This album, the Christmas album, is not really one of my favorites. In fact, when we get to my eventual ranking of the studio catalog, I think you'll find that the Christmas CD ranks in the lower third. That doesn't necessarily make it a poor album. It's just unadventurous, kind of repetitive of what's come before, and there's perhaps a dozen or more Tull records that I would reach for on any given day of the year other than Christmas. That's kind of generally how I feel about it. So let's kind of break down a little bit what's going on here. So for a band that is well known for its remarkable original material, written primarily by Ian Anderson, but also with notable contributions from people like Martin Barr, there's really only 4 original pieces here, and they are Birthday Card at Christmas, Last Man at the Party, First Snow in Brooklyn, and the final track, A Winter's Snowscape. In addition to that, you have several pieces that are re-recordings of older Jethro Tull songs. Those include A Christmas Song, Another Christmas Song, Jack Frost and the Hooded Crow, Weathercock, Fire at Midnight, Ring Out Solstice Bells, and the decidedly unfestive Beret. this leaves just a couple of, I think, 5 traditional pieces that have been reimagined and rearranged, much in the same way that Beret was back in the late 60s on the stand-up record. So it does make a lot of sense to include Beret, simply because there are a lot of pieces on this album that are very much in the style of kind of talled up classics or traditional songs. And let me just say before we get too much further that this is actually my favorite part of this album is the reimagined traditional pieces. I think that more than any other songs presented, they leap out of the speakers in terms of performance, as well as the mix that Bruce Soord has done. So of the original pieces, I think my favorite is probably A Winter Snowscape, which is a bar composition. I think Birthday Card at Christmas is okay. It's a nice way to set the tone for the album and starts off with some brilliant flute playing from Ian Anderson that gives you the impression right from the get-go this is definitely a Jethro Tull album. The one song that I'm not too crazy about is First Snow in Brooklyn. I never was too crazy about it. I just kind of feel like at this point in the band's career, Ian's voice was really no longer suited to singing these kind of ballads. And I think had it been recorded at the same time as like Stormwatch or even Broadsword and the Beast, if it had been recorded in those days, he might have really been able to belt this and bring it home. But as it stands, The First Snow in Brooklyn is decidedly my least favorite song on the album. And it's kind of the one that when I'm listening to it, my mind starts to drift. I start thinking about other things. And that's a shame. The other original piece, original to this album, is Last Man at the Party. And I enjoy this song. It's humorous. It's kind of talking about getting drunk and falling all over the place. It's not particularly connected to the holidays other than just that it's a time of partying and excess. But musically, it is kind of a soft rewrite of an older Tull song called Mayhem Maybe, which I think is a whole lot better. So I think this one's okay. Maybe it could have fit on Rupee's Dance, which was Ian Anderson's contemporary solo album. And again, it's not the worst song on the album. I do enjoy it on some level. As for the re-recorded Tull songs, the problem that I have with them is that when you listen to them, you kind of inevitably compare them to those older classic versions. And when you do that, they fall apart. With the exception of maybe Another Christmas Song, which is a re-recording of a song from the Rock Island album, which is another album that's not really a favorite of mine, but that's a good song from that album. I do think it's a really strong song, and it's a memorable song. And there's one thing that always held it back on the Rock Island album. It's Ian Anderson's drumming. I like on this version that we get Don Perry on the drum stool, and it really does elevate this song above, I think, what it was originally. As for the other recreations, I do really enjoy this festive arrangement of Beret. It's a little different, and it's even different than the arrangements that they were playing live at the time. So I like that they revisited this piece. A Christmas Song is basically unchanged from the original version, which is fine. I do think it needs to be here since it is the Christmas album, but I don't really prefer one over the other. I think that, you know, they're both basically pretty good. Jack Frost and the Hooded Crow. It's nice to hear this song again. It's a semi-forgotten number from the Broadsword and the Beast sessions, which I've always really liked. It's nice to hear real drums on it. I think that the original recording is an example of Ian Anderson using the Lynn drum machine. So it is nice to hear that, but there's something of the energy that lacks when compared to the original version. I would say the same for Weathercock and Fire at Midnight. Neither one of them really quite reached the level of the original recordings, and I think Ring Out Solstice Bells perhaps stands out as the weakest of the re-recordings. There's just no gusto whatsoever in the performance. It feels very reserved to me. And it just doesn't come anywhere close to the heights of the 1977 Songs from the Wood version. Now, the final handful of tracks, the ones that I said were perhaps my favorite group of tracks, that being the traditional pieces that have been reworked, that includes Holly Herald, which is a combination of Hark the Herald Angels Sing and The Holly and the Ivy. This is a beautiful, beautiful rearrangement, and I enjoy it every time it's on. Also, I think Greensleeved is excellent. I like their jazzy take on it. And I also very much enjoy We Five Kings, which has been converted into 5/4 time, and kind of reflects the fact that there were 5 members of the group at this time. But I would say the finest of these songs, and perhaps my favorite song on the album period, is their interpretation of God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen. Now, this is a song that does have some ties back to the classic era of the band, because if you listen to like the Bursting Out album, this is included as part of the flute solo in those performances back in the late 70s. So as a Jethro Tull fan of many years, I was always kind of hoping that they would do a proper studio version of God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen. And this version is really cool. I like what everybody brings to the table. So I didn't talk too much about the band that is on this album. And here's the 2003 original release, just in case you've never seen it before. But the band is the same that recorded JTull.com a few years earlier in 1999. And that is Jonathan Noyce on bass, Andy Giddings on keyboards and accordion, Ian Anderson, of course, on flute and vocals, Doan Perry on drums, and, of course, Martin Barr on guitar. Now, this is the final appearance of Martin, Doan, Jonathan Noyce, and Andy Giddings on a Tull record. Now, this is, of course, rounded out on some tracks. I would say about half of the album features Ian's son, James Duncan Anderson, on drums, and Dave Pegg, the bassist from the 80s era of Tull, returns on some tracks, playing mandolin as well as bass. So it's really nice to have Dave back. I do like having him on songs like A Christmas Song, and there is the sense that the Christmas album kind of ties up the era of the 80s and 90s Jethro Tull, because after this, of course, Ian Anderson wouldn't record for a number of years. I think it was 10 years before he came back with Thick as a Brick 2, and that was with pretty much a whole new band. So as it stands, this album is the end of an era, and it's kind of ending the era on a whimper, if you ask me, because I actually think that JTull.com is a lot stronger of a swan song than this is. But, you know, my reservations aside, I do think that it is a perfectly safe, enjoyable, and listenable album. Tull, at their least inspired, their least challenging, is still perfectly enjoyable music. And I don't mind digging this out about once a year and playing it. Let's talk about the new mixes. The original CD, when I revisited this, I noticed that it has a very brittle sound to it. It's very bright, and it's also quite compressed. There's something that's kind of fatiguing about it on your ears if you listen to the whole album. And it is quite a long album. It's over an hour long. So I feel like listening to this album in its original configuration can be a little bit fatiguing because of that heavy use of compression. What Bruce Soord has done with these new mixes, both the stereo and Atmos mixes, is I believe he's made this much more inviting, much warmer, and he's revealed a lot of the arrangements and the performances here. He's removed a lot of the gating off of the drums. They sound a lot more natural across the board. And the whole album it just sounds more like a Tull record to me, strangely enough. And I like also that he's brought back some parts that I think were muted out of the original mixes. Like there's some Andy Giddings keyboard on the final track that I don't remember hearing before. So it is actually quite good work. There is this sense when I was listening to it, and this is both the stereo and Atmos mix, and to some degree the original mix as well, there is the sense that it's a little muffled, like a blanket is covering the speakers. And I think this is a direct result of the fact that it's a digital recording dating back to the early 2000s. It's not going to sound as lush and beautiful as a vintage recording might. So once I kind of stopped comparing in my mind to other Tull records and kind of just appreciated it on its own merits, I think this is fine work from Bruce Soord, and I think his work actually makes me like the album a little bit more. It doesn't raise it to the level of a Songs from the Wood, or even a Roots to Branches for that matter, but it definitely improves it overall. Let's talk about the two performances that are included. So they are both Christmas services performed at St. Bride's Church in London, I believe on Christmas Eve. It was kind of I think to this day, it's a yearly tradition that Ian Anderson or Jethro Tull will perform these little church concerts, possibly culminating in St. Bride's on Christmas. So there's two performances. The Jethro Tull performance is from 2008 and has been previously released on an older issue of the Christmas album, which I don't have. So I can't really compare what Bruce Soord has done compared to what the original mix sounded like. But it does sound very good. It's very natural sounding. The church atmosphere offers a terrific vibe to the recordings, and it's very sweet. And in many ways, I think I may actually prefer the live performances to the Christmas album itself. The first performance presented is actually later. It's the 2008 Jethro Tull performance. And in between these songs, you have interjections from the Reverend George Pitcher, who does provide some really interesting liner notes here. He talks about being a Jethro Tull and progressive rock fan, which is something that I really had expected out of a Reverend. Really, I mean, maybe that's my own my own biases that I never would have expected that, but it was nice to read. And there's also an author who comes by and reads some poetry, Gavin Essler, and there are some choral pieces interspersed between the Tull performances. The band here is essentially Ian Anderson's solo band with Martin Barr on guitar. So that's James Duncan, his son, on drums, and he doesn't seem to be playing like a full drum set. It seems like it's very minimal percussion, which I actually rather like. I appreciate that. It's kind of an acoustic performance in a way. Dave Goodyear on bass, and John O'Hara on keyboards, and I think he does play some accordion here and there. The songs presented are quite unique. We open with a live version of Weathercock, which, to my knowledge, hasn't been performed since the early 80s. It was performed on the Broadsword tour as a medley with Fire at Midnight, which is actually a really nice performance, by the way. I kind of wished that on the Christmas album they had revisited that medley. But you also get another Christmas song, which I don't think had been performed since the late 80s, like the Rock Island tour. The version here of A Winter's Snowscape overtakes the album version for me easily. I really think it's something magical. And I also enjoy hearing Living in These Hard Times, which to my knowledge has never been performed live outside of this. I mean, maybe it was around this time. I'm not an expert on this particular era of Jethro Tull, but it was really nice to hear this old chestnut dug out. It is deficient a little bit in the percussion area. It's kind of hard for me to hear anybody but Barry Barlow playing those drum parts, but as it stands, it is quite lovely, and I enjoyed hearing it. Now, Ian Anderson's voice is a bit weathered on this performance. He's out of breath a lot, but it's relatively short. It's only an hour long, and I feel like the choir moments interspersed throughout the performance gives Ian a break. So as the set progresses, his voice does improve, and it seems like he's less and less out of breath as he goes along. And slight spoiler, but when they started doing Thick as a Brick at the end as part of the God Rest You Merry Gentlemen medley, I started thinking, what does this have to do with Christmas? And then Ian Anderson stuck in a little extra seasonal reference with, and your three wise men don't know how it feels. And that made me laugh quite a bit. So I liked hearing that. I liked hearing the sense of humor. And both of these shows, 100% of the proceeds went out to help homeless folks. And so there's just a very special vibe to it. It feels very exceedingly Christmassy in a way that I think I would enjoy playing this show on Christmas Day, and I just might this year. So the other performance is the Ian Anderson Band, and it's the same essential lineup as the 2008 show, except that instead of Martin, we get Florian O'Fall on guitar, and we also get Anne-Marie Calhoun on violin. Now, I saw this band. Florian was not part of the band when I saw them. There was another guitarist, but I did see Ian with Anne-Marie Calhoun in 2006 performing with a orchestra on stage. And a lot of these songs that are presented here were played that night. So I felt a really special tinge of nostalgia listening to this, and it took me back to 2006 when I saw the Ian Anderson Orchestral Jethro Tull tour. You know, the nostalgia factor, plus the fact that there's only 3 vocal songs on this concert. It's mostly instrumental, which allows for many flights of instrumental fancy and outstanding flute work from Ian Anderson. These elements together make the Ian Anderson show admittedly my favorite of the 2 performances. It's a really sweet listen. It has the same vibe that I'm talking about, that kind of laid back Christmassy thing. But there's something very special about this performance that makes me like it just a little bit more. It also features the choir better integrated into the performance, in my opinion, where you will have the choir singing the more traditional takes on these old hymns, and then it'll launch into the more jazzy, talled up versions of songs like Holly Herald, aka Hark the Herald Angels Sing, Holly and the Ivy, as well as We Three Kings, aka We Five Kings. I also greatly appreciate having Pastime with Good Company, aka King Henry's Madrigal. Stormwatch, that album in that period in Jethro Tull's history, 1978-79, is up there. It's in my top 3 all-time Jethro Tull albums, and they did play this the night I saw them, and I was so excited to hear it. So it's great to have a version here. I think there was previously released a version of this on an acoustic compilation, but I'm not sure. I think it's a different performance than what we have here. One small complaint about these live shows is that they're presented in stereo only, despite being advertised as new Bruce Soord mixes. I think these would have made wonderful Atmos mixes. They would have been wonderfully immersive and just would have taken you right into that church in 2006 and 2008. And I think it was a greatly missed opportunity to not present these in some sort of surround format, either 5.1 or Atmos. And beginning my my list of criticisms with this box, that's top of the list for me. I wish the live material had been included in multi-channel, much the same way that Tull live material has been included in multi-channel mixes in the past. Now, let's talk about the packaging. And this is an area where I have thoughts. Previously released box sets in this series have included extensive booklets, 96-page booklets, over 100 pages even, of interviews, background on the era, extensive liner notes from the guys from A New Day, Martin Webb. And I don't know if Dave Rees also contributed or not, but I know Martin Webb composed some wonderful liner notes in the past. This included pictures. There's not even pictures of the lineup that recorded this album in this set. There's only pictures of the live band, the 2008 live band. And those photos were included in the original version of the Christmas album, as well as much more detailed liner notes from Ian Anderson over the creation of this album. And I think it's a real shame that these things aren't included. What you get instead is about a page of notes from Ian Anderson, which aren't really as informative to me as the original liner notes. And you also get a couple of notes from George Pitcher, the Reverend from St. Bride's. And I did enjoy what he had to say, don't get me wrong, but I think there could have been more. I'd like to have heard a little bit more about the creation of this album. And I kind of get the sense that this album was a commercial choice, that it wasn't an album that, Ian and Martin had a burning desire to make, like, say, some of the 70s albums were, or even the 80s albums. But rather it was an example of the record label said, hey, you guys should do a Christmas album. And it was something that was put together rather quickly while Ian and Martin Barr were working on their solo projects, which I think probably had much more of their attention at the time. So much so that Ian indicates in the original liner notes that most of this album wasn't recorded with the band in the same room together. That it implies that he may have worked with James Duncan and Jonathan Noyce, but Doane Perry was sending in his tracks, and Andy Giddings and Martin were recording together at Giddings Studio and sending those in. So that could be why there isn't as much information in terms of liner notes, and there wasn't any true tour of this album. But it kind of concerns me for these box sets going forward. I hope that when we go back to Under Wraps, Crest of a Knave, Roots to Branches even, that more of a historical approach is taken to the presentation. Now, I realize that this box set is on a different label. It's on Inside Out Records and not Warner. That might have a lot to do with it. I just hope that in the future we return to the high bar of excellence that has so far been represented by these box sets. If you enjoy Christmas music, I urge you to check out the Christmas song that I produced. It's on YouTube, and I will leave a link in the description as well as the pinned comment to listen to it. It's also a bit of an anti-Christmas song, as many of Jethro Tull's contributions to the Christmas canon are. It's called I Ruined Christmas, and it's very fun, it's very funny, and has a cute little video to go along with it. So I would really appreciate you going and checking this out. It's something that I produced and worked on. Also, in the spirit of the Christmas season, I have left a link to my Amazon wish list, which includes a number of music items as well as film and Blu-ray items that would make a wonderful gift should you like to gift the channel during this holiday season. If you get a chance to hear this, let me know what you think. I would love to start a dialogue about the Christmas album. Where do you rank it among the catalog? Is it kind of in the bottom third for you like it is for me, or do you think a lot more of it? Would you compare it to the band's greatest work? You'll have to let me know in the comments section below. Until then, Once again, my name's Ian, and I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and Happy Holidays, Happy Tullmas, Happy Progmas, whatever you celebrate. I hope that it's a warm and happy season with your loved ones. No idea what I'm going to do next week. Might take the week off since it's the holidays, but subscribe and keep an eye out for my future updates. All right. It was fun. Catch you later.